that, okay, the economy will play just a minor little part, like running water, tap water, becomes a utility, something that's not really essential to our lives. When the economy, businesses, work, that's a big mechanism for status. We all want to get in there, make careers, we increase status, we make money. It's such an integral part of at least male behavior. How can it be, how do you think it's possible that it becomes just a little sideshow of our lives?
Well, I think because it will be cheap. Economics will be cheap.
Yeah, but let me interrupt here. Some empirical thing here about the very nice ideas, but let's put some rigor here. The world today is richer, we all agree, plus or minus a few countries, than it has ever been. No? Okay? So you would say that if we follow the ideal model of people who say, okay, economic life is a servant to our real aspiration, we'd be working less, we'd be enjoying life more, we'd be less concerned about the economy, we wouldn't be talking about it, okay? It's the exact opposite. We have more debt than we ever had. Okay, so this is the problem. In fact, there's something very strange in the world. Everybody talks about famine. Everybody talks about malnutrition. If you count the malnutrition and people who die of famine, okay, they're about 4% the number of the people who die of overfeeding, right? So this is where we don't know how to handle. So it looks like so I was saying it's very nice that if you look at empirically what's going on, it looks like we're more and more obsessed with economic talk. So we're not made to handle, and it's going to get worse. It's just like if I believe it, if I think, read the mind of John Gray, he would share the idea that it's not going to get better. We're not going to go to the ideal state of saying we have enough.
Let me comment on that. I mean, I was very glad that Tomasz mentioned Maynard Keynes's economic possibilities of our grandchildren, and also John Stuart Mill, Stationary State, which was originally written in the 1840s. And in there, so it's a long time ago, and in a sense a brilliant observation, he imagined a society, his utopia if you like, in which growth in the sense of the increase of production and consumption, and also, by the way, growth in the sense of human population, very important point, both for him and for Keynes, would stop, and the subsequent growth would be in the quality of life. Now, one of my comment on that is, that's one of the very, very few utopias that's not positively repugnant.
That's what?
Positively repugnant. Because one of the assumptions we make, I'm often accused of being a pessimist. Marxist-Leninist said to me, "You're a pessimist, child, a pessimist. Your view of what could have come about in the Soviet Union is infinitely worse than what did. Does anyone want to live in a society of the kind that Lenin dreamt of, where we're all egalitarian workers? The horrors of reality are actually more preferable to that." My point is that I think I share Nassim's doubts here. This idea of Mill's and of Keynes's is as remote or more remote than it was in 1848. We had a much smaller human population, far more people were dying of famine, far fewer people were obese, and at that time when you put it forward, everyone said it's impossible, it's far-fetched. And yet paradoxically, here we are, if you could bring Mill back, you could say there's enough wealth in the world, there are too many people, he would say. He'd be right, I think. But we're further from it than ever. So there's something in our relationship with the economy which is, in a sense, pathological.
Yes, I mean, we have evidence of that. I mean, we have evidence of that from a lot of people preferences where if you ask French workers, what would you like to get 1952, they all want 23% more on average. And then it's perfect, I want nothing more ever, right? And then you ask them in 1980, you get the same 22% more and it'll be perfect. So it looks like it's simply because there's something called hedonic treadmill that has been documented. Hedonic treadmill means very simply that you think, oh, if I had 10% more income or $1 million, it'd be perfect. Then I give you the money, and I'm not going to give to you myself or with me, all right? Someone gives you $1 million. Now, oh, another $1 million would be perfect, no more, right? And this is a hedonic treadmill, okay? So you have to, and plus there's another treadmill that comes with it called social treadmill. Social treadmill, and it's very interesting because I experienced it myself with traders, and it was the topic of my first book with people who are real character, thinly disguised. A fellow builds a house next to you, all right? Massive, you know, four-car garage, something, you know, that kind of long mansion. Now suddenly you feel poor again, okay? So no matter how rich you get, it's your neighbor who determines how. So you have a race, an arms race, and if you look at evolution, evolution is based on arms race, right? The peacock, all kind of stupid things come out of evolution. So it looks like one is ingrained in history. We see it empirically everywhere. And this idea of humans, because reading John Stuart Mill and saying no more of this silly book by Bertrand Russell, okay, that would
Pursuit of Idleness.
The Pursuit of Idleness, because we're going to go for leisure. Is Bertrand Russell, about the interesting thing about him is everything he writes, you should read backwards and be perfect, right? So, especially in his comments on philosophers, whoever he trashes and something like that. So it's very strange. It's so strange that that he got Wittgenstein. He liked Wittgenstein, maybe for the wrong reason, right?
Yeah, because
So,
he didn't understand.
Because he didn't understand it. So, but Bertrand Russell, the Pursuit of Leisure. So if you look empirically, so we have to work with that. So the idea that if I'm a John Grayist to talk about my idea of utopia, you got to exploit the diseases of humans, right, to make them better. Not work on this moralizing, you know.
Can I add to that? I mean, I agree with that fully. I put it in this way. I know this sounds very counterintuitive and all, but we have a surfeit of ethics. We have too much ethics. The core of ethics is what Nassim described earlier, which is based in human sympathy and compassion, which is care for the weak and the frail. That's ethics, as well as keeping your word and being fair and honourable. But where ethics becomes overinflated, in the way that Nietzsche and others have described, is in prescribing a general ideal and requiring everyone to live in it.
Yes.
That's a via positiva. That's the difference between via positiva and it's very, very interesting mathematically. Is that if you look at, we don't realize that we are very, very good at eliminating unhappiness. The state can eliminate unhappiness, but it's very different from creating happiness. And the Enlightenment switch via negativa means removal of a stressor, removal of something bad. That's how we frame it. Is removal of a source of pebble in your shoe, for example. That's the via negativa. So you're not improving things, you're removing what hinders the system from functioning properly. You're removing the criminals from society. That's via negativa. Via positiva is you're trying to enforce you have an idea, the state has an idea of what we should be doing. We've been excellent historically at via negativa measures. If you take the 10 Commandments, 7 out of 10 are via negativa, but the ratio is even higher in the texts, right? What shouldn't you be doing? Don't kill your mother. You understand, right? It doesn't tell you buy flowers every Mother's Day for your mother at 9 o'clock. It's surprising.
Just tell you be thin.
Yeah. So anyway, so this is the idea of via negativa. So as we're realizing ethically we're excellent at via negativa, but very bad at via positiva and forcing it on others. Exactly.
Yeah, but isn't this already sort of materializing? I like the point of too much ethics. I would also think that the point is that the economy is not depressed, it's manic depressed, the mania is the problem more than the depression. But we already have a body of ethics that's telling us what to do. I think this is the perfect trick of economics. It pretends to be value neutral and resistance to ethics, while at the same time it actually dictates you its own body of ethics, with which you might, or don't have to agree. Some of it is good, some of it is interesting. But it's not true that economics is void of ethics and we need to input some ethics into it. We need to replace it or reduce it.
The very idea of efficiency can easily turn into a crass ethics.
Absolutely.
Especially when applied to institutions. I mean, if you look at actual real institutions, ones in which people do have skin in the game, they're full of waste. Nature's full of waste.
Yes, exactly.
And we don't look at them and say, well, we've got to take the waste out. That, by the way, has happened in my own country, in the United Kingdom. I've seen in my lifetime lots of institutions which, in one sense, work very well. They did what People wanted them to do, they were valuable, they contributed to the life of society. But in another sense, they were wasteful. The BBC used to have a library which was free. That was decided to be wasteful. That was wasteful. So what they did was they threw out large amounts of what was in the library, which is a library of recordings in part, and they were irreplaceable. Then they attached, under a modernisation anti-waste program, they attached very high prices to borrowing anything from the library on the part of by BBC employees. So if a producer was producing a film or a radio program, they had to go and pay a large amount to borrow it. That was efficient. Which meant in practice, many of them told me, they actually went out onto the street and bought it more cheaply if it existed anywhere, in a shop. So in other words, you move from an institution which had grown up over many generations, which was wasteful, wasn't very expensive, by the way, on the other hand, it wasn't that expensive, but internally there was all kinds of waste, but which did what it did well. And you say, we must be efficient, that's a as Thomas has said, they would say that's a non-evaluative, morally neutral kind of demand. What it was almost a kind of anti-sumptuary law Puritanism applied to institutions, which produces an institution which is impoverished because nobody can do anything anymore.
Yeah, there's something actually empirically you can notice. I mean, you can see it here, and it applied to Ticino. People come in Ticino with two lungs, no? They're born with two lungs, two kidneys. Okay, so there you go. This is evidence that if an economist working for the BBC trying to stream a consultant working
let's take one of them out and sell it.
Exactly. Let's tell one lung. And now I'm using 5% of my lung capacity. Yeah. So it's waste. Right? So there you go. So what happened is that you exit the gene pool with that. No, I'm not saying there is a redundant. I don't buy 4 copies of a newspaper. Of course, I don't buy newspapers, but you don't buy 5 times 5 newspapers, right? But there are things you should not optimize. By
the way, Wittgenstein said that a skeptic is someone who buys a second newspaper to see if what was in the first newspaper.
so maybe I should buy copies of the newspaper.
That's exactly the fallacy of David Ricardo, who said you specialize. Every country should specialize in doing its thing, and do it fully.
On that, I want to exactly bring that point of David Ricardo. If you let systems, I'm going to say the truth now, first time. I'm not as classical an economist as you can make it. Pure. The problem is that I'm a little more skeptical of some of the cut and paste they've done with their models. So if you take the model properly, David Ricardo said this country specializes in wine, the other and so on. If you take the model, you write it down, the price of wine, the price. I came from trading where we never trust models without perturbating them, injecting more randomness. In other words, the way I would treat it is I would take the price of wine, make it volatile, the price of wheat, make it volatile. So in other words, you don't take the assumptions for granted. You make these assumptions also variable because the environment is variable. It's called enriching the model, and it's totally consistent with it. Instead of doing what Ileto di Procrusti, cut the person to fit the bed, you make the bed bigger to fit the person. Okay? Simply, I spent the night at the hotel here, beautiful hotel, they didn't cut my legs because the bed was small. Right? But economists tend to do that methodologically, and they don't have to. So if you enrich the model a little bit, okay, so bureaucrat, they make it simple so bureaucrat you enrich it a little bit, you realize that all these paradigms, all these stories, like Ricardo, you have wine, you specialize in wine, you specialize in, okay. But what if there's a fatwa on wine in the West? What if the Ayatollah comes to Berlin and say, okay, fatwa on wine, right? What happens to the one who specializes in wine? He's starving. And effectively, anyone who knows history who should despise these models because Ireland specialized in, guess what, potatoes. And what happened to Ireland? 2 million people died. Actually, 1 million went to America. I don't know what's worse. But the population of Ireland today is 4 million, 4 or 5 million. So you realize specialization. So that's the problem. Redundancy, okay, functional redundancy is had more than one specialization. there's functional redundancy. And we look at it, the beauty of the redundancy example is that mathematically you can map debt